Yeah, I'll react to that, sure. Hey guys, all right, learning time, Habsburgs. Now, you're going to sit down and you're going to learn, all right, with me, Kings and Generals. Let's go. This will be interesting. Lies, fraud, and deception, rise of an empire. A lot I want to learn about the Habsburgs, actually. Like, are they Spanish? Are they Austrian? Are they everything? Let's go. Kings and Generals, original link to the video, top of the description. My name's Connor if you're new. Hey, guys.
The White King was an excellent student. As a child, he grasped the 7 liberal arts and spoke 7 languages. He even pursued dark magic, but never too deep to harm his immortal soul. As monarch, the White King always strived for harmony, although his enemies were many. The traitorous Green King, the cunning Blue King, and the ambitious Black King all tried to plunge the empire into chaos. Yet none succeeded, for the White King's excellence only matched his love for peace. Emperor Maximilian of Austria composed the Romance of the White King as an autobiography. Yet his account of his own life was a highly embellished one. The Habsburgs were the pioneers of fake it till you make it. In a span of a few centuries, the House of Austria leapt up from counts and dukes to archdukes, kings, and emperors. Much like the White King, the story of the Habsburgs is full of lies, fraud, deception, and unnatural luck. In this video, we will explore how the Habsburgs
Sounds like just the story of humans, to be honest.
used these tactics to become the most powerful family in Europe. Every week, we release 3 new exclusive videos for our members and patrons. The Pacific War, the Eastern Front of World War II Prelude, and many other series, including the War of Spanish Succession, Punic Wars, Iberian Reconquista, Russian Revolution and Civil War, North African and Italian campaigns of World War II, and much more. It has been long overdue, but we have finally created a YouTube channel exclusively for our Kings and Generals podcasts. Please go and check out Kings and Generals podcast, home to the Pacific War Week by Week podcast, and the Fall and Rise of China podcast, link in the description and pinned comment.
Cool.
To see those, as well as get access to our exclusive Discord, see our schedule, and get early access to all videos, join the ranks of our patrons and YouTube members via the links in the description and pinned comment. Thanks to our supporters for allowing us to continue doing our dream job. The land of Austria had a storied history long before the Habsburgs came to rule over the territory. The name itself derives from the term Osteriki, which first appears in chronicles in 996, when it was used to denote the eastern borderland of the Holy Roman Empire. Since then, people have referred to that territory as the Eastern Realm, Österreich, or simply Austria. The first known rulers of Austria came from the House of Babenberg. The Babenbergs were not the most powerful or the most prominent dynasty of medieval Europe, but they made up for their deficiencies with a surplus of ambition. The Babenbergs married into the lines of both Holy Roman and Byzantine emperors, and claimed at least some inheritance to the Roman Empire. When the line of Babenbergs died out, Emperor Rudolf I assigned Austria to his own dynasty, the Habsburgs. Initially, the relationship between the Austrians.
Okay, so it originated in Austria. That was probably obvious to some, but it wasn't to me, so it spread to places like Spain afterwards.
Austria to his own dynasty, the Habsburgs. Initially, the relationship between the Austrians and their new rulers was strained. The Habsburgs were a Swabian dynasty and mostly treated Austria as a cash cow. They saw themselves as an imperial dynasty, not just some regional lords. Yet their ambitions soon clashed with reality. Rudolf's successor, Albert, failed to acquire Bohemia and was then murdered by his nephew. Albert's son, Frederick, fought an 11-year-long civil war for the imperial throne, only to lose it to the Wittelsbachs in the end. Even in their ancestral Swabia, the Habsburgs were forced into retreat. Following this streak of defeats, they truly had become reduced to the mere lords of Austria. When Frederick died, the leadership of the Habsburg dynasty passed to his brother, Albert the Lame. Albert was, in a sense, the first Austrian Austria. When Frederick died, the leadership of the Habsburg dynasty passed to his brother, Albert the Lame. Albert was
Brothers named the Fair and the Lame. It just seems so diabolical.
in a sense, the first Austrian Habsburg. He moved his court to Vienna, to the site where Hofburg stands today. It was around this time that the Habsburgs adopted the legacy of the Babenbergs, using the symbols of Austria's former rulers to shore up their legitimacy in the region, despite not being related to the old dynasty.
Interesting. So does that Austrian territory does sort of reach the Adriatic, it seems? Which I wonder if the much later fighting between Italy or the Italian states and Austria over this land was because of these reasons, that like the Austrians felt like they were owed it.
Albert was in a sense the first using the symbols of Austria's former rulers to shore up their legitimacy in the region. Despite not being related to the old dynasty, they took on the Babenberg coat of arms, picked up their favorite personal name of Leopold, and even adopted
Austrian
their grand ambitions. Emperor Charles IV didn't want Habsburgs anywhere near the imperial throne. In his Golden Bull of 1356, Charles identified the 7 imperial electors, the archbishops of Cologne, Mainz and Trier, the King of Bohemia, the Count Palatine, the Duke of Saxony, and the Margrave of Brandenburg. Aside from electoral rights, these 7 privileged nobles gained extra privileges. They could call their own assemblies, had judicial autonomy, and sat in the first row in the imperial diet. They were, both in practice and ceremony, one step above the ordinary imperial princes. Austria was notably missing from this list of electors. Faced with institutional irrelevancy, the Habsburgs responded in the most fraudulent way possible.
So, the Holy Roman Emperor, did he create those 7 positions specifically to spite the Habsburgs, or was he going to create them anyway and didn't include the Habsburgs because they were threatened by the Habsburgs too much?
Constitutional
Am I getting that?
The Habsburgs responded in the most fraudulent way possible: document forgery. Soon after Albert the Lame's death, his son Rudolf told his scribes to come up with 5 fake charters, 2 of which were especially egregious. Charter 1 was allegedly written by Emperor Henry IV. It recorded letters written by ancient Romans that concerned the lands of Austria. Among the apparent Roman authors in these letters,
whoa, what?
Allegedly written by Emperor Henry, 2 of which were especially egregious. Charter 1 was allegedly written by Emperor Henry IV. It recorded letters written by ancient Romans that concerned the lands of Austria.
So, wait, they forged ancient Roman things? Or I sound like a seal, oh, did they forge a document that included real Roman letters, or did they just forge the whole thing?
Among the apparent Roman authors in these letters was none other than Julius Caesar, who asked the people of the Eastern Realm to accept his uncle as their ruler. These fraudulent antique letters also claimed that this fake uncle of Julius Caesar was one of the Roman Empire's most prominent statesmen. Emperor Nero allegedly wrote another letter addressed to the Eastern Realm. Allegedly, Nero was so amazed by the splendor of the Austrian people that he released them from all imperial taxes forever. Charter 2 was more believable, for it was partially authentic. The original charter was written by Emperor Frederick I Barbarossa, who elevated Austria to a duchy back in 1156. All the Habsburgs did was to add some extra privileges to the document, thereby elevating Austria to an archduchy. Consequently, Austria was proclaimed the shield and heart of the empire and could not be divided between sons upon succession. Its ruler was invested with a special crown and scepter and could sit at the emperor's right hand. Emperor Charles IV was not impressed. He confirmed the whole thing as long as its provisions were legal, but made no changes to the list of electors and still forbade the Habsburgs from sitting in the first row. Charter 1 was...
Wait, so that would be like someone today forging documents from the Byzantine Empire and then presenting them today as a reason to have some autonomy? Is that what's going on here?
Exposed as fraudulent early on by from sitting in the first row. Charter I was exposed as fraudulent early on by Petrarch, who was one of medieval Europe's most influential poets. Charter II, however, was only proved to be a forgery in the mid-19th century, 400 years later than the donation of Constantine. Status was not the only thing the Habsburgs wanted, for Rudolf also had his eyes set on the wealthy land of Tyrol. The Tyrolean Alps were full of gold and silver, and much of the trade between Germany and Italy passed through the region and its toll stations. Moreover, by taking Tyrol, the Habsburgs would be able to unite Habsburg lands in Austria with their ancestral domains in Swabia. During the 14th century, Tyrol was held by Countess Margaret the Big Mouth, who was not an easy woman to deal with. She
I wonder, was it figurative or literal?
physically kicked out her first Luxembourg husband, didn't bother with a divorce before marrying a Wittelsbach, and was promptly excommunicated by the Pope. Her only son was dead, she had no heirs, and she was now embroiled in a feud with both Luxembourgs and Wittelsbachs. Taking advantage of the Countess's dire situation, Rudolf of Habsburg convinced Margaret to become his vassal. She was allowed to keep Tyrol for herself during her lifetime, after which she would pass it on to the House of Austria. However, Tyrol's landlord disagreed with this deal and forced her to retract the agreement. To counter this reversal, Rudolf turned once again to document forgery. He and Margaret came up with a charter which had allegedly been signed 4 years prior and could not be retracted. It was not a good forgery, for they even used the wrong seal for the occasion. But it worked out, and the landlords gave way. By the end of the year,
Did they like pour coffee on it or dirty it up a little bit to make it seem a little more old?
Margaret retired comfortably in Vienna, and Rudolf became the Lord of Tyrol. Emperor Charles IV was not happy about this development, but he already had antagonized. At the end of the year, Margaret retired comfortably in Vienna, and Rudolf became the Lord of Tyrol. Emperor Charles IV was not happy about this development, but he already had antagonized Austria too much. So
I'm sorry. Just
out, and the landlords gave way. By the end of the year, Margaret retired comfortably in Vienna, and Rudolf became the Lord of Tyrol. Emperor Charles IV was not happy about.
I tend to think of like it's nice to learn that like people really did care about procedure and like legitimacy and like, is this a real thing? Like, because I'm sure a lot of other people think like me, think in this way. I think less of it now, but that the further you go back, especially this far back, like 800 years, 700 years, whatever, that I imagine it's just like, nope, I'm king, you're not king, fight me, you know? But there's all of this procedure, and it makes everything more interesting. And it should be obvious that that's the case, right? People are similar as to how we are, identical as to how we are now.
This development.
I mean, like, mentally, you know?
Rudolf became the Lord of Tyrol. Emperor Charles IV was not happy about this development, but he already had antagonized Austria too much, so he was willing to let it slide. In 1364, Charles accepted the Habsburgs' rule over Tyrol. The two houses signed a mutual inheritance treaty. Luxembourgs and Habsburgs were now in a family pact. If one house died off, the other would inherit their domain. For Austria, inheritance quickly became an issue. In 1365, Archduke Rudolf died young at the age of 25. His teenage brothers, Albert and Leopold, ruled together for a while. They even made some territorial gains, acquiring Freiburg and Trieste. Despite this, things didn't work out. Even though Barbarossa's forged letters proclaimed Austria indivisible, the two brothers split the realm anyway. For 113 years, Austria would be divided. In theory, it was still the same united Habsburg entity, with the eldest of the rulers having nominal authority over the others. Yet in practice, the two brothers had different priorities. They even supported different popes during the Western Schism. Of the two, the realm of Leopold has a more eventful history. Its titular founder, Leopold, upheld the family tradition of losing to Swiss farmers before dying at the Battle of Sempach. His title was contested by his two sons, Ernest and Frederick, and by the 1400s, they had split the Leopoldine into two. Meanwhile, the Albertine line fared better. It was run repeatedly by people named Albert. Of those, Albert V was the most successful. He maintained the family pact with the Luxembourgs and was a strong supporter of Emperor Sigismund. Moreover, he took part in fighting the Hussites as well as the Ottomans. In gratitude, Sigismund awarded Albert with the highest award of them all, the hand of his daughter Elizabeth. In 1437, Emperor Sigismund passed away, leaving behind no sons. As the husband of the emperor's daughter and a Habsburg, Albert V inherited the Luxembourg crowns of Hungary and Bohemia. Soon he was elected emperor. Thus, from out of nowhere, the Habsburgs were back in the game. As king and emperor, Albert campaigned in Bohemia for a while. Then he took up arms against the Ottomans and promptly died of dysentery. His reign only lasted for a year and a half. Albert's death made 3 thrones vacant at once, those of Germany, Bohemia and Hungary. Hungary fell into a political crisis. His son, Ladislaus, was merely a toddler. In 3 thrones vacant at once, those of Germany, Bohemia and Hungary. Hungary fell into a political crisis. His son, Ladislaus, was merely a toddler. In Bohemia, power was assumed by a local warlord, George of Podjebrady. In Germany, however, things went differently. An apocalyptic prophecy spread over the land, telling of a mighty emperor named Frederick who would unite the world under true faith, journey to Jerusalem, and bring forth Judgment Day.
Would you be like, oh, I'm Frederick? Sorry, that wasn't funny.
World under true faith, journey to Jerusalem, and bring forth Judgment Day. These texts largely emerged from Syria, the domain of the eldest Habsburg ruler, who was conveniently named Frederick. Whether thanks to the prophecy or not, in the year 1440 he was elected Holy Roman Emperor Frederick III. Frederick soon acquired a bad reputation. He was introverted, melancholic and slothful. He barely travelled outside Austria and generally preferred gardening to governing.
It's like me.
Future Pope Pius II even called him an arch sleepyhead. That being said, Frederick's famous motto, A-E-I-O-U, claimed that Austria was destined to rule the...
You know how like a lot of insults back in the day, like 100 years ago, were much more serious than they are now? So I wonder if sleepyhead, which now is such like a, oh, you sleepyhead, if that was like a dual-worthy insult.
The world. Frederick's famous motto, A-E-I-O-U, claimed that Austria was destined to rule the world, and indeed his reign would be far from unsuccessful. Frederick's first challenge was domestic. His uncle, Freddie with the empty pockets, passed away shortly before the election, leaving Tyrol to his underage son Sigismund. Frederick
brutal. I can't follow the story because I'm laughing at the names.
Before the election, leaving Tyrol to his underage son Sigismund. Frederick became his warden and governed Tyrol in his name. He tried to do the same in Vienna with the newborn Ladislaus, yet the boy was a contested asset. Frederick entered a 5-way competition with the mother of Ladislaus, Hungarian nobility, Austrian estates, and the Czech warlord George. For a while, Frederick essentially held young Ladislaus hostage. After the loss at Varna in 1444, the Hungarians tried to press the issue and elected Ladislaus their king. Yet,
I was about to say there's no way Ladislaus loses without reproducing, because he has the Habsburg look already.
Frederick essentially held young Ladislaus hostage. After the loss at Varna in 1444, the Hungarians tried to press the issue and elected Ladislaus their king. Yet Frederick refused to hand him over. In 1452, a joint coalition of Austrian, Bohemian and Hungarian nobles gathered an army to fight Frederick and besieged him in Wiener Neustadt. With nowhere to go, Frederick conceded. Ladislaus moved to Prague and assumed the throne of Bohemia. He died from the plague 5 years later, leaving behind no children.
Never mind.
For a while, Frederick could forget about Hungary. Ladislaus was the last of the Albertines, and his Austrian lands were now up for grabs. Although Frederick was an obvious heir, his brother Albert demanded a portion of the inheritance too. A war broke out and quickly spiraled out of control. Law disappeared, soldiers were left without pay, and the countryside was subjected to pillage. Albert joined forces with George, now King of Bohemia. Even Vienna rebelled. By 1462, Frederick was stuck in Hofburg, besieged by Albert's army. He was saved at the last minute. George of Poggiobradi switched sides and rescued Frederick from the siege. In yet another miracle, Albert died prematurely the next year, also leaving no male heirs. After Frederick reached an agreement with Sigismund of Tyrol, the war was over, leaving Emperor Frederick III the undisputed ruler of most of Austria. Distracted by the crisis at home, Frederick paid little attention to German affairs elsewhere. Brandenburg, the Palatinate and Swabia were all involved in wars of some sort, but Frederick largely disengaged from the issue. He travelled twice to Italy, and in fact was the only Habsburg emperor crowned by the Pope. In 1471, Frederick called for a diet in Regensburg and requested an army to contain the growing Ottoman threat. The empire responded and granted him a token force for border defense. Evidently, the lack of interest was mutual. However symbolic the imperial title was, it still had value. That became clear a few years later when Frederick came into contact with Charles the Bold, the Duke of Burgundy. Charles was one of the most prominent rulers of the era. He accumulated a vast amount of land and titles and dreamt of becoming a proper king, which Emperor Frederick could arrange. In 1473, the two men met in Trier. Negotiations went nowhere and even led to a short war. Charles invaded near Cologne, but saw no success. Austria and Burgundy returned to negotiations and...
Is this still the one that was like the lazy one? The sleepyhead? Because it seems like his tactic kind of worked out for a long time.
Moreover, Austria and Burgundy returned to negotiations and reached peace. Moreover, Charles the Bold agrees to arrange a marriage between his only child, Mary, and the Habsburg prince Maximilian. Charles then promptly died at the siege of Nancy. He left no male heirs. A scramble began, both for Mary's hand and for her father's realm. King Louis XI of France wanted Mary to be engaged with his son.
I'm always surprised by the dying with no male heirs. I guess you could have a lot of female children, but I mean, you're royalty. You're going to find a wife, and like that's like your whole purpose of marriage. It's not it's like you're marrying so that you can continue your dynasty. And so many just, nope. I know there's going to be a lot of childbirth mortality or just early childhood mortality, and you're going to have a lot of girls born who can't inherit. But still, I'd figure like you're gonna, well, I mean, if you die like 6 years after you marry from some campaign, then that's 6 years. You might have like 3 failed pregnancies and then have a girl, and then you have no male heir. So.
Yet the young Duchess of Burgundy.
I feel like I said like had a girl, like I have a problem with. Of course I don't. I'm just saying during the time period. Well, why am I explaining myself?
Was in love with Maximilian, engaged with his son. Yet King Louis XI of France wanted Mary to be engaged with his son, yet the young Duchess of Burgundy was in love with Maximilian. The Austrian prince, who was barely 18, rushed to Bruges for his wedding. Consequently, Maximilian spent the next several years at war with France, fighting for the Duchy of Burgundy. The decisive clash of the war occurred in August 1479, when Maximilian besieged the fortified border town of Therouanne.
Ooh, we're getting a battle scene.
The French marshal, when Maximilian besieged the fortified border town of Therouanne. The French marshal, Philippe de Crèvecoeur, rode to relieve the town. Hearing the news, Maximilian lifted the siege and moved against the French. The two armies met south of Therouanne, not far from the village of Guinguet. The French army was organized in 2,000 squads or lances. It included 2,000 heavy cavalry, 2,000 light Custilier cavalry, and 4,000 mounted archers who fought the battle on foot. It also included 8,000 so-called free archers, who were professional soldiers. It was a force dominated by cavalry and marksmen, although artillery had a presence as well. On the other side, the Burgundians possessed 825 heavy cavalry, 825 light Custilier cavalry, 300 English archers, and about 3,000 archers, crossbowmen, and handgunners, alongside a smattering of artillery. At the core of the Burgundian army were 11,000 Flemish pikemen. They were equipped with long spears and halberds. Many noblemen, including Maximilian, fought.
Are there any gunpowder weapons yet?
On foot.
Did I miss
with
that?
long spears and halberds. Many noblemen, including Maximilian, fought on foot as part of the formation in the first rank. Ironically, the Austrian ruler was fighting a battle using the tactics of the Swiss, a people his ancestors had lost countless battles to. Crèvecoeur placed his cavalry on the flanks. In the center stood the infantry and the artillery. Maximilian's formation was similar. Infantry in the center.
Well, I know Gustavus Adolphus, actually, this is the guy right up here, was like, he had a name like the father of modern warfare, or I think he's known today by some, in that he kind of revolutionized gunpowder weapons in tandem with, you know, more steel, older type weapons, because gunpowder weapons weren't so reliable. This is in the 1400s, right? Late 1400s. And so I see they have cannons here, but I doubt that they're... I mean, a cannon is still a cannon. Oh.
Center and cavalry on the flanks. Importantly, the Burgundian infantry was divided into two large contingents. The left was commanded by the Count of Nassau and the right by the Count of Romont. It was a defensively solid position, protected by a circle of wagons. The battle began on August 7th at 1400. Crèvecoeur sent his two cavalry wings forward against the outnumbered Burgundians. The French found success on the right wing, where they scattered the enemy and captured the cannons there. A large portion of the French knights left the battlefield in pursuit of the fleeing Burgundians and captured their camp. The rest started an assault on Nassau's contingent. It was a nasty affair in which the Flemish pikemen, who were mostly townsfolk and peasants, had to withstand the pressure from armoured knights, professional archers, and their own cannons. After an hour-long struggle, they gave ground and lost their artillery. On the other flank, things went differently. The Burgundian cavalry survived the French onslaught and gave Romont room to maneuver. Seeing Nassau's force losing ground, he led his contingent on a counterattack. Romont pushed against the French centre, overran the artillery, and turned the French marksmen to flight. As Crèvecoeur's forces were retreating, Maximilian's army entered the French camp. The Burgundians carried the day. The victory at Guingat allowed Maximilian to make peace with France. He had to surrender Artois and the original Duchy of Burgundy, but kept most of his father-in-law's patrimony.
Ooh, I wonder if this... I didn't realize how far up Burgundian territory went, and I wonder if this later is foreshadowing to Habsburg Spain control of the Netherlands, maybe?
Artois and the original Duchy of Burgundy, but kept most of his father-in-law's patrimony. Only 1 year later, his wife Mary died, leaving Burgundy to their 4-year-old son, Philip. Thus, Maximilian married at the age of 18, became a father at 19, and a widower by 23. While events were unfolding in Burgundy, Austria itself was weirdly absent from the game, for Vienna had other worries. It is here that we have to turn our attention back to Hungary. After the death of Ladislaus...
This Maximilian's life so far could be a crazy movie. You even have the love story.
Indeed, Austria itself was weirdly absent
from a giant battle that he won.
While events were unfolding in Burgundy, Austria itself was weirdly absent from the game, for Vienna had other worries. It is here that we have to turn our attention back to Hungary. After the death of Ladislaus, the Hungarian estates needed a new king and elected a 14-year-old boy named Matthias. Surprisingly enough, this was a brilliant choice. Nowadays, Matthias Corvinus is celebrated as one of Hungary's greatest rulers. Early on, he made a deal with Frederick. The Habsburgs abandoned their claims on Hungary and recognized Matthias as king. In return, Corvinus got the Luxembourg treatment. If he died without male heirs, the Habsburgs would inherit his throne. With the western flank secured, Matthias as king. In return, Corvinus got the Luxembourg treatment. If he died without male heirs, the Habsburgs would inherit his throne. With the western flank secured, Matthias could focus on the Ottomans threatening his southern border. That struggle occupied Matthias until 1482, when he reached an armistice with the Sultan. Now he could unleash his forces on Austria. At his disposal, he had the Black Army, arguably the best fighting force of its day. The war started disastrously for Frederick and resulted in the Hungarians overrunning Styria, Carinthia, Carniola, and parts of Lower.
I thought they had just... Was that a kind of a betrayal? I thought they had kind of made an agreement, not like an anti-warfare agreement necessarily, but I thought they were kind of on good terms there.
Austria, and resulted in the Hungarians overrunning Styria, Carinthia, Carniola, and parts of Lower Austria. In 1485, Matthias besieged Vienna. The winged hussars had not arrived, and the city simply fell to the Hungarians. Within 2 years, the same fate awaited Frederick's main residence of Wiener Neustadt. Thereafter, Matthias proclaimed himself Archduke of Austria and demanded Frederick renounce the inheritance treaty. In response, Frederick fled to Linz and started politicking.
He was busy gardening.
He made the imperial electors accept Maximilian as his heir and tried to arrange for some reinforcement from the empire. They never arrived. With no good options left, Frederick waited for a miracle. A miracle indeed happened. Matthias Corvinus, like several people before him in this video, died an untimely and convenient death, leaving, you guessed it...
Am I stupid? Is Frederick still the guy who's like the one who just wanted to garden and was kind of sleepy? It seems like that strategy is working out very well since everyone else is dying around him.
No male heir. Died an untimely and convenient death, leaving, you guessed it, no male heirs. Having been saved from total deposition by Deus Ex Machina, Frederick was happy to leave Hungary to its own devices and turned once again to domestic issues. Sigismund, whose pockets were empty as those of his dad, ran Tyrol into a perpetual fiscal crisis. By 1490, Frederick brought an army into Tyrol, sacked the local advisors, and simply bought Sigismund's domain. For the first time in many generations, the Habsburg patrimony was united under one ruler. Frederick III was by no means an exciting monarch. Charles the Bold, Matthias Corvinus, George of Poggiobrady, and even his brother Albert all had more prominent personalities. Yet Frederick
but they're all dead.
Outlived them all. In a sense, he followed the strategy of do nothing and wait for competitors to shoot themselves in the foot. When Maximilian I inherited the throne in August 1493, he already had experience as a statesman, and it was mostly negative. In the Low Countries, he constantly faced opposition, revolts and uprisings, and had even once been imprisoned. His tenure as emperor was more successful. He reformed the administration of Austria, making it more modern and efficient. He organized the Landsknechte Corps, which for a century would be the backbone of German armies. Tyrol and its silver mines prospered. The empire as a whole witnessed a reform, which made it a bit less of a mess. Most importantly, he broke the Pope's hold over the imperial office. Maximilian could not be crowned in Rome, since his French and Venetian enemies blocked the road there. The Pope, however, was on Maximilian's side and recognized him as elected emperor. This was an important precedent. From now on, Holy Roman emperors no longer needed to be crowned in Rome. At some point, Maximilian even wanted to become Pope himself, and had enough money to bribe the cardinals and make it happen. Maximilian's military record was also extensive, even if unfruitful. History remembers him as the last knight, and he considered the stirrup to be his true home. Most of his campaigns took place in the quagmire of the Italian wars. In the grand scheme of things, they achieved little. Indeed, the Habsburgs' own motto put it best, "Let others wage war, you, happy Austria, marry." That being said, Maximilian's marriage policy was a gamble. His sole male heir, Philip, married the Spanish princess Joanna, while John, heir to the Spanish throne, married Maximilian's daughter Margaret. John died soon after, and so did Philip. Yet unlike John, Philip left multiple sons. The eldest of them, Charles of Ghent, was set to inherit the Spanish, Austrian,
There's that jaw.
Burgundian and imperial thrones at once. One day he would be known as Emperor Charles V. King Ferdinand of Aragon tried to prevent this development and married again. Yet luck was once again on the side of the Habsburgs. His new wife...
Man, the late 1400s are super eventful. I love finding out different parts of certain centuries that are more fruitful as to how like the rest of history turns out. And late 1400s in Europe, especially, you know, mid-central southern Europe, super important.
Only bore him one son, who died a few hours after birth. If one marriage gamble wasn't enough, Maximilian tried another one. He made a deal with the King of Hungary and Bohemia, Vladislaus II. Maximilian's grandchildren, Mary and Ferdinand, married Vladislaus's children, Louis and Anne. Although not during Maximilian's lifetime, this gamble would pay off too. After Vladislaus and Louis, the Habsburgs would inherit the thrones of Bohemia and Hungary. It would be unfair to claim that the Habsburgs owe their empire only to fraud and cheating. After all, at least some of them were good organizers, administrators, and
nothing happens that way. I feel like nothing happens through sheer just calculated will. You know that nothing happens that way, and so this seems like exactly how a empire would rise. This seems like that. Some luck, some, happenstance, some good leadership, some people dying around you that did. I mean, this is how history works out, And I think this makes me think of all of the leaders that died. And I feel like we tend to see history as just like, this is what happened, and it always would have been what happened, right? No, it's survivorship bias. That's it. It's survivorship bias. It's this just happened. Any other group of people could have been there, and I think that's important to learn. Let me know if you disagree.
Yet they also enjoyed some insane luck in their rise to power.
Of course.
Margaret of Tyrol, Emperor Sigismund, Ladislaus the Posthumous, Charles the Bold, Matthias Corvinus, Catholic monarchs of Spain, and King Louis of Bohemia and Hungary all died without male heirs. Each death left a throne vacant, and the Habsburgs always made sure they were the ones to fill it. This was how the Habsburgs built their empire, by winning a game of musical chairs. More videos on Central European history are on the way, so make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button.
It's like, I'm trying to think of an historical figure. Say like Adolf Hitler, who he was not shot. I believe a story in World War I. Adolf Hitler is just a figure that I can think of that had an enormous impact on history in basically starting World War II, and had an instance where he almost died. Like, a Allied soldier saw Hitler, who was a soldier in World War I, and was going to shoot him, but didn't shoot him. And it's like, that was never, like, ordained to happen. And it's like, oh my God, imagine if he was killed there, right? That makes me think about all the different things that would have happened in history. Think about the amount of times that did happen to someone who would have had an enormous impact on history, good or bad, but was shot or was, accidentally fell and hit his head and died or something. You know what I mean? And so I maybe I'm projecting, but I feel like it's like this stuff seems like it's just gonna happen no matter what. Whenever you go back in time, like, this is gonna happen. It's sort of like the butterfly effect kind of thing, but I don't want to bring that up. It's survivorship bias, and we are in one timeline of trillions and trillions of possibilities of timelines,
Please consider liking, commenting, and sharing. It helps immensely. Our patrons and YouTube members can watch more than 200 exclusive videos. Join their ranks via the link in the description or by pressing the join button under the video to watch these weekly videos, learn about our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our private Discord, and much more.
8-hour video on the complete history of Middle-earth. I think I found my going to bed video.
This is the Kings and Generals channel, and we will catch you on the next one.
Thank you very much, Kings and General. Awesome videos as always. Great channel. They're almost at 4 mil. Deserved. Love y'all. Hope you're all doing well. Would appreciate any comments down below. Did I say anything stupid? Call me out. Did I say anything incorrect? Something you disagree with? Let me know in the comments. Answering any questions I have. You guys are always great with that. And hopefully I'll see you guys next video. We'll keep on learning together. Bye, guys. Have a good day.